After a portal to another world is opened, the government sends a team of supervillains to be the first ones to explore. The story begins as we see Harley Quinn taking hostages in a robbery with the Joker, and she's excited to change the world with him. The police arrive to free the hostages, but the place suddenly explodes. On the other side, Chief Agent Amanda Waller initiates the experiment for a portal to a new world. The scientists explain that the portal is unstable due to low energy levels, so she orders them to increase the power. They warn her that it might kill the girl they're using as an energy source, but she isn't worried, thinking the girl is just a tool. Harley and the Joker flee the scene, and the police start chasing them down, blocking their path. But Harley uses a bazooka to destroy them, as the Joker gives money to the people. He thinks the world is ugly because it's controlled by capitalists, and everyone's crazy about money, so he wants to create a new world where everything is equal. The police are about to catch up to them, so Harley throws bombs at them, stopping them in their tracks. The Joker tells her about the world he wants to create, but she suddenly stops the car, thinking it's time to enjoy a drink. She cheerfully enters the bar, but everyone ignores her, so she becomes suspicious. She approaches a bartender, asking him where Kay is, so he explains that Kay is off duty, but she knows that there's nobody named Kay in the bar, so she realizes it's a trap. She starts fighting, and she warns the Joker not to enter. Meanwhile, the portal is out of control, but Amanda orders the scientists to increase the energy, as the girl powering the portal starts twisting in pain. Harley is still fighting in the bar, but she's struggling against a group of armed men, so the Joker drives his car into the wall, which distracts them, as she takes them down. But military reinforcements arrive, so he's forced to retreat. Harley manages to escape, and she climbs the building, trying to contact the Joker, but a sword suddenly flies at her, and she sees a samurai girl named Katana. She prepares to fight Harley, who pulls out her baseball bat, wondering why Katana is doing this. They start fighting, and Katana disarms Harley, who refuses to give up, dodging her attacks. She grabs a pipe, using it as a weapon, but she struggles to keep up with Katana, and she still ends up losing. Katana knocks her out, and she ends up getting captured, as the soldiers inform Katana that the Joker was able to escape. Harley overhears this, and she's glad he didn't get caught, promising to find him again. Everything begins to break, as the portal's energy continues to increase, and it suddenly explodes. But Amanda realizes that the experiment worked, saying they have finally opened the door to a new world. 6 months later, Amanda heads to the secret base Argus to find superhuman candidates for her plan. The director, Wade, tries to convince her that it's a terrible idea because the place is full of supervillains. But she tells him to shut up, revealing that she knows about his scheme to divert prison resources. So he realizes she could destroy his career, and he opens Harley's cell, where they see her watching cartoons. But Amanda turns off the TV, saying she has a job for her. They handcuff her, and Wade tells her he deserves a reward for being good to her, but she kicks him, telling him that only the Joker has access to her, but she gets tasered by Amanda. He squirms on the ground, but Amanda doesn't care, ordering him to take her to the other prisoners, and he mentions that she's crazy, but she thinks a little craziness is needed to change the world. After that, we see Harley dreaming of crossing a portal, but she wakes up handcuffed next to a man, and she's upset because he isn't the Joker. He complains that he ended up on the worst team possible, but one of their companions gets offended, and he mentions that this is no way to talk to a girl. He wonders if they notice anything special about him, but they think he looks ordinary, so he becomes upset because they don't recognize him as a movie star. They see a prisoner wearing a sack over his head, so Harley wonders if he's ugly. But he explains that he doesn't want to reveal his face because he doesn't want to compromise his mission, saying he would do anything for peace. The person in command appears, giving them the mission instructions, and he plays a video of Amanda, who explains that the 5 members of the team need to protect a series of bridgeheads, which will serve as the framework for conducting research and exploration. She mentions that they'll have their sentences reduced if they succeed, but reveals that she has placed bombs in their necks, so their heads will explode if they don't cooperate. She adds that the bomb will detonate if they get too far from the signal for 72 hours, so there's no escape for them, and they have no choice but to obey her orders. The mercenary Deadshot provokes her, asking her if that's all, but she mentions that she could also go after his daughter. So he becomes furious, promising to kill her if she touches his daughter, but she ignores him and tells them to obey their leader Adam, who decides to release them so they can change. But the actor recalls that Amanda said there should be 5 of them, so he wonders where the 5th member is. But the alarm suddenly starts ringing, so Adam goes to check and notices that the pilots are dead. Their helicopter falls, and they end up crashing in the middle of nowhere, where we see a battle taking place. A knight named Cecil sees them, so he wonders what's happening and decides to investigate. We return to the chopper as Harley gets up, realizing that the others were able to survive, but Adam didn't make it. She notices a sword in the cabin and uses it to free herself from the handcuffs. She decides to investigate the area, but she loses her footing and she's about to fall to her death, but Deadshot saves her, pulling her in as the others remove their restraints. The actor suddenly transforms his hand, using it to destroy the other door as everyone realizes he's a metahuman. They leave the chopper and they look around, but they're confused because they appear to be in a fantasy world, which is filled with magic and mythical creatures. They ask Mr. Sackhead if he knows what's happening, since he mentioned he's on a peace mission, but he admits that he's completely clueless. A group of orcs suddenly surrounds them, trying to talk to them, but they can't understand what the orcs are saying, and the actor asks them if they're on a movie set. So they attack him, and Harley realizes everything is real. Deadshot seems worried, but she's excited, because it's easier to understand the situation, thinking she just needs to take down the enemies. A monster suddenly emerges from the chopper, and it goes into a frenzy, killing the orcs, and we learn that he's a metahuman called King Shark. Harley joins him as she starts fighting the orcs, and Mr. Sackhead grabs an axe, cutting down everyone in his way. He throws his axe, and he starts fighting with his fists, as we learn that he's a vigilante known as the Peacemaker. The actor transforms into a mud monster, and he starts pounding the orcs, as he's introduced as the shape-changer named Clayface. Deadshot shoots the orcs after getting his equipment, but there's too many of them. So he finds the leader, but the guards get in the way, so he changes his plan, climbing the chopper to get a clear view. He shoots the leader, killing him in an instant, so the orcs decide to retreat. After the fight, Cecil finally sees what's happening, and he notices King Shark, so he draws his sword, but Deadshot disarms him. He uses his bracelet to call the sword back, and the squad wonders if this is magic. But Clayface realizes what's happening, saying he has always read about it, and he reveals that they were transported to another world. He asks Cecil if they were summoned as heroes with special abilities, asking him to take them to the king, but they're taken to the dungeon instead. A royal carriage passes through a war-torn village, where the villagers are starving, so they start begging for help, but the queen ignores them, and the soldiers push them back. Meanwhile, we see a group of nobles watching the battle with the orcs, and they praise the queen for the victory. Cecil thinks they shouldn't be so happy, because there are thousands of citizens starving every day, but they don't care, asking him if he's against the queen. But she demands silence, explaining that even though the battle was won, she can't call it a victory until the orcs have been wiped out. Cecil asks her what they should do with Harley's squad, as he admits that they're strange, but they were able to turn the tide of battle. But she thinks they aren't important, so she orders him to forget about them and start planning for the next battle. He thinks they could be useful assets in the war, but she calls him a coward, telling him not to rely on others to fight for the kingdom. Princess Fiona thinks he has a point, thinking Harley's squad can help them win the war, but the queen tells her to stop, saying she has already made up her mind, and she concludes the meeting. After that, we see Fiona in her room as she watches the children fighting over a piece of bread, while she has plenty of food, but she refuses to eat. Cecil joins her, realizing she's skipping her meals, so he reminds her that starving won't help the people. She knows he's right, but explains that she has no appetite, telling him she has a favor to ask of him. We see Harley being interrogated, but she mocks the police, telling them they're idiots. So they become furious, and they start torturing her, but there's suddenly an explosion as the Joker arrives to save her. But she suddenly wakes up in the dungeon, realizing it was all just a dream. Deadshot asks the others if they know what's happening, and Clayface realizes they aren't being welcomed as heroes. He thinks they deserve better treatment because they helped the humans win the battle, thinking the god who sent them to the world doesn't know how to make a good story. Deadshot thinks he's insane, but Peacemaker interrupts them and mentions that the biggest problem is time, because if what Amanda said is true, the bombs in their necks will explode after 72 hours. He knows that 12 hours have passed since they were captured, so they have 60 hours to return to their world. Clayface doesn't like how the story is unfolding, and he decides to leave the prison, but they think he can't break the bars. So he explains that brute force isn't his style, and he slides through them, saying he's about to change the story. He decides to leave the others behind, thinking he needs to sacrifice them for his character development. But Harley and Deadshot are shocked that he's planning to leave them, so they start calling the guards to capture him. Peacemaker grabs him, and he tries to escape, but a guard restrains him with magical handcuffs, which prevent him from using his powers. The guard opens the cell, telling everyone it's time for lunch, and they sit together, as Deadshot asks Clayface if he'll help them escape, but he explains that he can't do anything thanks to his handcuffs. A group of ogres suddenly interrupts them, telling them to leave the table, and they can't understand what the ogres are saying, but Deadshot knows what they're trying to do, so he decides to fight them. But Clayface tells him to calm down, saying it's not a good idea to make enemies, because they can't afford to waste time. He thinks it would be easier if King Shark were with them, but he's still sleeping in the cell after eating so many orcs. He tries to talk his way out of the situation, but the ogres don't understand what he's saying, so they punch him across the room. Deadshot flips the table on them, and they start fighting. Harley manages to take down the leader, and she starts beating him up, as Peacemaker deals with the others. The guards arrive to break up the fight, but they see the squad doing their victory pose, and the guards don't like it, so they use magic to pin them to the ground. The squad is taken to the disciplinary cell, where they meet another human who speaks their language. He reveals his name is Rick Flag, and he's an agent of Argus, wondering if Amanda finally sent reinforcements. He explains that they aren't the first team to be sent there, revealing that he was the leader of another squad, and their goal was to make first contact with the people of this world. Deadshot wonders why they did this, so Rick explains that they were sent to explore an unknown world, because their country wanted to monopolize its natural resources. Deadshot realizes that Rick's team failed, so Amanda sent a squad of criminals on a suicide mission, because no one would care if they died. Peacemaker asks Rick about the bomb transmitter, telling him they need to reset the timer before the bombs explode. He thinks the transmitter is near the portal, realizing they share a common goal, so he offers to show them the way back if they help him escape. They don't like the idea of working with him, but King Shark suddenly wakes up, and he says he's hungry, so everyone's terrified. He's ready to eat them, but Rick tells him there's tasty food on the other side of the door, so he tries to break it down, and this draws the attention of the guard. He manages to break the door, so the guard tries to use magic, but Deadshot stops him as Harley grabs his wand and uses it to send him flying. Clayface approaches the unconscious guard and frees himself from the magical handcuffs, allowing him to use his powers again. He decides to free all the other monsters to create a commotion and notices that his powers are stronger in this world. They use this opportunity to defeat all the guards, and the monsters help them take over the prison. Meanwhile, Cecil heads toward the prison as he recalls his discussion with Fiona, who believes Harley's squad can help end the war. He explained that he was only interested in their weapons, but she told him to talk to them, and he decided to fulfill her request. But he's shocked when he sees the prison has been taken over, and the prisoners are celebrating on the roof, as the squad finally gets along with the monsters. He arrives at the gate, but is confronted by the squad, and he asks them what they're doing, but they still can't understand what he's saying. They remember him as the man who sent them to prison, thinking he looks like a stressed-out salesman without his helmet. He can't understand them, but he knows they're mocking his hair, so he pulls out his sword and throws it at Harley. But King Shark stops the attack, eating the sword, so Cecil uses his bracelet again, and the sword flies out of his stomach. But his wound suddenly heals, and everyone prepares to fight, but Rick tries to calm them down. Deadshot refuses to back down, but Rick asks him if he wants the Imperial Knights on their tail as they try to reach the portal. Rick reveals that he learned the language of the world while he was in prison and decides to handle it, saying he doesn't want to fight. Cecil understands what he's saying, but the phrases he learned from the orcs are full of insults. So Cecil becomes upset, and he prepares to attack them, but he suddenly remembers that Fiona personally asked to get their help, so he decides to take them to the Queen. They're taken to the castle, where they meet the Queen, who casts a spell, which allows them to communicate using the language of the world. Rick takes the initiative and thanks her for granting them an audience, explaining that he has an urgent request to make. But she tells him to know his place, reminding him he's just a prisoner, but he reveals that he has valuable information about the war, and all he wants in return is freedom. He mentions that the beasts have become stronger recently, explaining that it's thanks to their new commanders, who are also from another world. Hearing this, Harley realizes what must have happened, thinking the first team was also composed of criminals, but they betrayed Rick and somehow joined the Beast Empire. The Queen realizes that the kingdom is losing the war because Rick couldn't control his team, so everyone becomes furious. But Peacemaker intervenes, saying they'll do whatever it takes to make amends, and guarantees that they will be successful. So she takes Rick as a hostage, saying he will die if they fail, and Cecil doesn't like the idea of fighting alongside them, but the Queen reminds him that he was the one who brought them to her in the first place. Rick is taken away, but before he leaves, he reminds the squad that he's the only one who knows where the portal is, so they must not abandon him, and they retrieve their gear, as they prepare for the fight. The kingdom's forces clash with the Empire, and we see the squad observing the battle, because Cecil told them not to participate, saying the kingdom will win without their help. Deadshot doesn't want to fight the beasts, because they put everything on the line to defeat their opponents. He wonders what kind of training made them fight like this, but Harley doesn't think they were trained. She's experienced enough to know they have been brainwashed, which means they're dealing with a villain who uses brainwashing. Deadshot thinks about obedient animals, and believes he knows exactly who they're dealing with. He reveals that the commander is probably his old friend from prison, so he suggests talking to him. They go to the side of the fortress, and Clayface tries something new, touching the fortress walls, and making a hole. The others are surprised by what he can do, and Deadshot wonders if he can bring down the whole fortress, but he doesn't think he can do that, because there isn't enough moisture. He explains that he's still learning how to use his powers, revealing that he felt magic running through his body since they arrived, and Harley notes that she also felt it. His ability is to control the clay of his body, but now it seems he can control any type of clay. They move through the fortress corridors, taking down the guards they encounter, and they finally reach the roof, where they see the commander leading the beasts. Deadshot calls out to his old friend Ratcatcher, who is surprised to see him, and Deadshot calls him his buddy, but Ratcatcher can't stand him. In a flashback, we see Ratcatcher in prison, and he was bullied by other prisoners for being a weirdo. So Deadshot took him under his wing, trying to help him, but he always ridiculed him, and this made him feel terrible. Deadshot kept bothering him in every way possible, thinking he was being nice, but he ended up making things worse by giving him rotten cheese in exchange for his food, and forcing him to get a bad haircut to scare other prisoners, leaving him traumatized. Back in the present, Ratcatcher wants to kill Deadshot, ordering his beasts to attack the squad, as the others wonder why he's angry. His usual power only allows him to control rats, but now he can control any beast he wants. The group fights against the wolves, and Peacemaker realizes they're outnumbered, so they need to get rid of Ratcatcher. He shoots Ratcatcher, but one of his wolves protects him. The group continues taking down the beasts, and Deadshot tries to make Ratcatcher remember the old times, but this only makes him angrier, and he increases the power of the wolves. Clayface points to the giant water tanks above them, and Deadshot shoots them to flood the roof with water. With enough moisture on the ground, Clayface uses his power to control the fortress walls, causing the wolves to fall down. Peacemaker shoots Ratcatcher again, but Katana suddenly appears to save him, and Harley isn't happy to see her, as she recalls that Katana separated her from the Joker. The fortress walls collapse, and the whole place is destroyed, but Cecil thinks the squad ruined the plan to retake the fortress, and he scolds them for destroying everything. But Deadshot tells him that his army would have lost the battle if it weren't for them, telling him he just needs to rebuild it. We see the Queen and the officials watching the battle, and everyone praises the Queen for the result, as Fiona realizes she was right. Katana talks to Ratcatcher, reminding him that the Emperor hates incompetence, and he's aware of this, so he promises not to fail next time. We see gang members entering a building as the Joker watches them, asking Harley if she knows the best way to hunt them, thinking they're like rats, because they do nothing but cause trouble for everyone. Harley wakes up from her dream, but is frustrated that she's still in a cell. Deadshot thinks they didn't do anything wrong, and he admits that they might have overdone it by destroying the fortress, but they still won the battle. Peacemaker mentions that they have 12 hours left before the bombs explode, and Deadshot thinks they're doomed, but they see Fiona approaching. Clayface realizes she's a princess, and he tries his luck, but Deadshot stops him, asking her when they'll be released, but she doesn't know. She looks at Harley, who notices that she was also looking at her when they appeared before the Queen. Harley gets irritated, but the others don't understand why she's so upset, so she explains Fiona reminds her of her old self. Cecil arrives with the cell keys, revealing that the Queen wants to speak with them. We see a flashback of Fiona as a child, when she climbed onto a rooftop with her friends. She finds the view stunning, but her friend reminds her that she's disguised as a commoner, so she shouldn't speak so formally. She asks him about his family, so he explains that they're doing fine, but the price of bread is increasing, and he's struggling to make ends meet, so they're having a tough time. She notices Cecil calling, so she realizes she needs to go, and before she leaves, her friend asks her when the war will end, but she says she isn't sure. Later at the palace, we see Fiona being scolded for going to the city and playing with commoners, and the Queen is angry that Cecil lied to cover for her. She reminds Fiona that she has a different duty from the commoners, so she wonders what the duty of royalty is, and the Queen tells her it's to bring an end to the war. But she couldn't stop the war, and she ended up seeing her friends die. We return to the present, as Cecil reminds Fiona that the War Council meeting is about to start. The enemy army is marching, and the council is terrified, seeing them as a threat. Cecil explains that the Imperial army is heading towards the plains through the forest, and the guards at the reclaimed fortress won't be enough to stop them, so they could reach the kingdom in 2 days. Everyone panics hearing this, but Harley wonders why she's still handcuffed, because she thought her squad would be released after they retake the fortress. But the Queen explains that they didn't fulfill their part of the deal, because they destroyed the fortress instead of retaking it. She asks Rick about the enemy commanders, but he wants to know how the war started, so that he can understand the enemy's situation. We learn that the kingdom has been at war with the Imperial army for decades, but the war intensified in the last 6 months, because the elves and beastmen betrayed the kingdom to ally with the Empire. Rick is surprised that the beastmen they fought were originally subjects of the kingdom, and he thinks Ratcatcher is the reason why the beastmen joined the Empire. Deadshot wonders why he didn't blow up his teammates' heads when they rebelled, so he explains that the bombs in their necks were somehow deactivated, and it's probably why Amanda put a timer this time. The Queen is about to send them back to prison for being useless, but Harley suddenly remembers what the Joker taught her about hunting rats. She explains the idea, and they realize that they need to lure Ratcatcher to the front line, but Peacemaker thinks they don't have enough people to do this. So Rick asks the Queen if she's willing to lend some of her soldiers, and the council members start insulting him for his suggestion, but Fiona speaks up, explaining that it's for the kingdom. But even Cecil thinks it's a bad idea, saying the knights won't be enough for the plan, but Harley mentions that she can find capable warriors for the mission. They set up camp near the destroyed fortress, and the ogres from the prison arrive. Harley greets their leader, and he still respects her from before, so he follows her orders. She talks to the rest of the criminals, and tells them that if they work hard in the battle, they'll be released from prison, so they get excited. Rick gives Clayface a task, and he doesn't seem thrilled, but he agrees to do it. Rick scolds King Shark for eating all the rations, and he asks Peacemaker why he isn't doing anything to stop King Shark. He talks to Cecil, who wonders why he's leading a team full of strange criminals, so he explains that he's just following orders. That evening, Clayface returns after finishing the barriers, thinking they'll be enough for the battle. The squad discusses the battle plan together, as Rick tells them about the defensive line formed by the soldiers. Cecil notices that Deadshot is missing, so they explain that he's on the roof as a sniper, saying it's best to leave him there. Clayface asks Cecil about Fiona, so he explains that she has a good heart, and there's no one in the castle who cares as much about the people as she does. But Harley thinks she's just a coward who can't stand up for herself, making him angry. King Shark smells the enemy approaching, so they alert the troops that it's time for battle. Cecil asks the squad to command the ogres, but Harley and the others refuse to join the battle, thinking they aren't needed, so he curses them. Ratcatcher's army approaches, and he notices the barriers with soldiers behind them. He realizes the kingdom is trying something, but he laughs at them, since they're completely outnumbered. The soldiers wonder if they'll be able to win the battle, and Cecil tells them to stay focused, reminding them that they need to protect the lives of the kingdom's citizens. Ratcatcher uses his power to strengthen his army, and he's looking forward to getting his revenge on Deadshot, but a bullet flies past him. but he thinks Deadshot must have missed, and he orders the beasts to attack, but they all stand still. Deadshot notes that his job is done, as Ratcatcher realizes that his staff has been destroyed. We learn that this was Deadshot's plan, because he knows that Ratcatcher's powers shouldn't be that strong, thinking he's relying on his staff to control the Beastman. So they set up the barriers to lure Ratcatcher into an open field, and make him raise his staff so that Deadshot could destroy it. The beasts turn on Ratcatcher as he begs for his life, but they show him no mercy. Harley remembers what the Joker said when he set up a trap to make two rival gangs fight each other, saying the best way to hunt rats is to make them devour each other. A messenger reports that the beasts are confused, and they don't want to fight anymore, so the kingdom has won the battle. Cecil is also confused, but the squad mentions that they fulfilled their part of the deal, so they're free to do whatever they want, and they head out to reset their bomb timers. Meanwhile, the council learns about the victory on the plains, so everyone celebrates, but the queen appears to be upset. The squad manages to find the gate, but it's up in the sky, so Deadshot wonders how they can get to it. The bombs in their necks start flashing, so Deadshot tells Rick to do something, but he mentions he has no control, saying they can only pray for the reset signal to be sent. Peacemaker counts down the remaining time, but they get the signal just in time. The group is relieved, and Harley wants to get some food, but Rick mentions they still need to complete their mission, reminding them that they are there to establish and protect the bridgeheads that will serve as their foundation into this world. He thinks they should prioritize building their relationship with the kingdom, so he tells them to help with ending the war. So we see the squad fighting in a number of battles, but Deadshot ends up running out of bullets. He notes he's useless without his guns, but Harley doesn't care, drawing a heart with her bullets, and she notes she could just fight with a frying pan. Rick has an idea, and he mentions that his original team didn't crash, so their helicopter and supplies should still be fine, but they landed on the west side of the mountain, so they'll need to go back to the fort first, and Cecil mentions they will go on ahead. The group heads back to the fort, and the ogre mentions they're having a feast, welcoming them to join as his pan grows and they start cooking. Harley wonders if there's a special occasion, so an ogre mentions they were given alcohol as a reward for fighting, and they're also free to do whatever they like in the area, as long as it doesn't belong to the Empire, so they think the kingdom aren't so bad. The next day, the group prepares to head off, and Harley takes one of the frying pans. They encounter various monsters and obstacles along the way, but they eventually make it to the mountain. They head towards the summit, but find a dragon has made a nest with the helicopter. They wonder how to deal with it, and Harley thinks fighting a dragon is usually the final boss, but Rick tells them not to give up. Clayface decides to try something, so he uses his powers to transform into a strange creature to perform a mating call, but it has no effect, and Deadshot laughs at his attempt, so the two start fighting, causing the dragon to approach them. They all run away, dodging its attacks, but King Shark gets taken. We see Deadshot has one bullet left, and Clayface uses his powers to create a huge wall to stop the dragon. Rick and Peacemaker decide to go for the supplies, and Deadshot takes his shot at the dragon's eye, but it gets blocked, and the dragon spits King Shark out. The dragon shoots a fireball at them, but Clayface manages to block it. Harley worries about King Shark, but we see he's just a little burnt. The dragon prepares to attack again, but Harley remembers her pan, and uses it to reflect the dragon's fire, causing debris to hit the dragon. The dragon attacks with its tail, but Deadshot saves Harley just in time. He calls out to Rick to get them their weapons, and Harley decides to have a look for herself. We see Rick and Peacemaker checking the supplies, and Rick finds a radio. Harley joins them, and she sees a bazooka, which she thinks will be perfect. The dragon continues chasing Deadshot, but he falls over, wondering why the others are taking so long, but Harley throws the bazooka down to him. Peacemaker distracts the dragon, and Clayface grabs its tail, giving Deadshot the chance to fire the bazooka. The dragon starts to fall, so Deadshot runs for his life, and barely manages to avoid it, but the ledge breaks, and King Shark catches him just in time. After that, Clayface asks Peacemaker how he was able to distract the dragon, so he reveals he used the dragon's egg. He wants to try cooking it, but Harley thinks it would be too cruel, so she takes it from him. The egg suddenly hatches, and Harley finds it adorable, as Clayface notes that it must see Harley as its mother, so she decides to name him Arthur. While the others are distracted, Rick makes contact with Amanda and reports the situation. She asks about the advance team, so he mentions that they all joined the enemy, so she tells him to get rid of them. The helicopter is too damaged to fly, so they pack what they can and start heading back. Deadshot is glad he won't need to worry about ammo for a while, and Harley smells something burning, so Rick rushes forward, and they see that the fort has been completely destroyed. Harley sees the leader of the ogres as an elf kills him, so she becomes upset, and she charges in with the others. The elves see her approaching, so they try to stop her, but her companions protect her. One of the elves prepares to cast a spell, and Peacemaker threatens her, but he realizes he's about to get attacked, so he uses her as a shield. A woman known as the Enchantress appears, and she threatens everyone with her crystals, as an army of elves joins her, along with their leader called the Thinker. He looks down on the squad, thinking they're all idiots, and Deadshot tries to shoot him, but a shield protects him. Harley asks him if he wants to avenge Ratcatcher, but he explains that he doesn't care about him, and the Enchantress tells them their fort has already fallen, so there's no reason for them to fight. But Harley wants to avenge the ogres, and Peacemaker throws bombs, as Deadshot shoots them, causing them to explode. She charges in, but the Thinker's barrier protects him, and one of the elves uses magic to blow her away. Clayface appears behind them, and he launches a surprise attack, but they suddenly turn around, blocking his attack. The Thinker mentions that he can see through their plans, thinking they're predictable, and he explains that he linked the brains of the elves, so they're able to move as one. King Shark dashes forward, so the Enchantress confronts him and uses her barrier, but King Shark bites it, and he's able to damage it, so she tries to shake him off. But her barrier is about to shatter, so she pushes him away, and he falls into a lake, where he encounters another supervillain called the Killer Croc. An enormous monster restrains him, and it throws him away, as Killer Croc starts beating him up. He manages to push Killer Croc against the wall, but the monster suddenly appears, and it attacks him. We cut to Harley, as she starts fighting the elves. The mages use wind magic, so she runs for cover, as Deadshot shoots them down. But more mages appear, and she insults the Thinker, saying he can't do anything alone. But he hears her, so he becomes angry, and he activates the crystals, stunning Harley's companions, as they start having nightmares. She tells them to get a grip, but the Thinker asks her if she still thinks he can't do anything alone, and the Enchantress tells him to end their suffering. So he takes a gun, and he shoots them, as she flies to Harley, telling her to surrender. But she suddenly attacks the Enchantress, who explains that she doesn't like working for anyone, and she only has a temporary alliance with the Empire. But Harley doesn't like her, telling her she keeps working for scumbags, so she becomes upset, and she unleashes her powers, as Harley gets knocked out. She suddenly gets a vision of the Joker, who tells her she can't die yet, because they still need to create a new world together. As she regains consciousness, she sees Rick threatening the Thinker, telling him he's going to blow his head off. But the Thinker doesn't believe him, thinking the bombs have been deactivated, because he didn't detonate them when they got separated. But he explains that his orders are to capture them alive if possible, and he wonders if the Thinker wants to test him. We see that Killer Croc has defeated King Shark, and he asks his comrades why they aren't done yet. So the Thinker decides to retreat, saying they have already destroyed the fort, and he thinks Rick and Harley are helpless. So he tells them to do whatever they want, and he flies away with his team. The elves collapse, and Harley starts crying, telling Rick her companions are dead. But they realize that Clayface is still alive, and he reveals that the impact knocked him out, but the bullet suddenly stopped for some reason. Deadshot wakes up, and he sees a glowing bullet on his chest, so he pulls it out, wondering what just happened. At the castle, we see the squad in the dungeon, as Cecil asks them how they lost, because he thought they were invincible. But everyone falls silent, as he realizes that they still can't get over their defeat. Meanwhile, the members of the council learn about the incident, so they start to panic, but the Queen interrupts them, telling them there's no reason to panic, because they just lost expendable prisoners. She thinks the fort wouldn't have fallen if the knights were stationed there, and she blames the squad for the disaster, because they were the ones who released the prisoners. So she wants to have them executed, but Fiona is against her decision, saying killing them won't improve the kingdom's situation. But the Queen explains that it will keep the military in line, and everyone in the council thinks they should never have relied on outsiders. After that, Fiona talks to Cecil, who thinks the squad doesn't deserve to be executed, and she tells him that ending the war is the duty of royalty. But she thinks she can't trust her mother, thinking her anger towards the squad clouded her judgment. He asks Fiona how she feels about them, so she explains that she wants to believe in them, and he admits that he has taken a liking to them, telling her he has a plan. We see the squad in a dungeon, as they blame Rick and Argus for everything that happened. Arthur appears, and Clayface suggests using him to help them escape, because they can't use their powers. He tries to breathe fire, but it doesn't work, and Cecil arrives, advising them to keep their voices down if they're planning to escape. He opens the door, and Harley wonders if they're about to get executed, so he explains that the Queen wants them dead. But he tells them to escape and fight the Empire, so that they can prove their worth, and change the Queen's mind. Deadshot thinks he just wants to use them, but he explains that he doesn't want them to die, because they risked their lives for the kingdom. He mentions that his lover died because of the war, and he asks Deadshot if he has a family waiting for him to return. Fiona arrives, telling Cecil they're running out of time because the soldiers are starting to find her suspicious. So he asks them if they want to follow his plan, and Deadshot tells King Shark to open his mouth. He starts giving advice as he touches King Shark's tooth, but he bites him, and Harley asks Deadshot what he's doing. So he explains he was trying to pull out a tooth, so that King Shark will realize that sharks can regrow their teeth, thinking it's going to get him fired up. So Clayface decides to give it a try, and he manages to pull a tooth out, but King Shark becomes angry, and he chases Clayface away. Rick and Deadshot follow them, but Harley asks Fiona if she's sure about her decision, and she explains that she isn't, but she recalls her friend who struggled to feed his family. She told him that the soldiers always have food in their camp, so he decided to steal from them, but they killed him because they thought he was working with the Empire. She heads to his grave, where she sees a boy crying, and he tells her to get lost, blaming her for what happened. Her mother scolds her, telling her the boy died because of her, and she tells her to behave properly. Back in the present, Fiona thinks her mother is wrong, so she decided to go against her, and Harley follows the others, as Peacemaker joins her. Fiona asks Cecil if she's doing the right thing, so he explains that he doesn't know, but he will continue to support her regardless. The squad manages to escape from the castle, but the alarm rings, so Rick tells them they need to hurry, because the soldiers are looking for them. They enter a carriage, and Deadshot realizes their equipment has been attached to it. Harley wonders if they have a plan, so Peacemaker explains that he has a strategy, saying they need to eliminate the Thinker. Meanwhile, we see the Thinker near the portal, revealing that he peeked into their minds, so he knows that they need to visit the portal to reset their timers. The elves cast a spell, and a base emerges from the ground, as he mentions that the squad will never be able to outsmart him. In a flashback, we see Harley with the Joker as they plan to rob a bank, but he mentions that the security is extremely tight, so nobody has ever broken into it. She wonders how they're supposed to rob it, thinking they should just give up, but he explains that he wants to do the impossible by breaking into the bank. He explains that he isn't doing it for money, but for the thrill of it, and he tells her he already has a plan. Back in the present, the squad sees Thinker's base, as Harley realizes that he's trying to stop them from resetting their bombs. Clayface thinks the base looks beautiful, but Deadshot reminds him that their bombs are about to explode, and he looks around the area, saying the elves are everywhere. Clayface uses his powers to create a map, and Deadshot shows everyone where the elves are stationed, thinking it's impossible to sneak into the base. Harley is surprised as she sees Katana with the Thinker, and the squad thinks she's the leader of the group. Peacemaker suggests that they should lure her away before they kill the Thinker, but Harley wants to fight the enemies head-on, saying she wants to get revenge, but Clayface thinks her plan won't work. He reminds everyone that the elves' minds are connected, knowing it causes incredible strain, so he wonders why their brains are still intact, and Rick explains that Thinker's cap makes it possible, so they need to find a way to remove it. Harley recalls the moment she broke into the bank with the Joker, and she tells everyone about it, saying they just need to threaten the person who has the keys. Peacemaker thinks her idea is brilliant, and he comes up with a plan, saying King Shark and Clayface will approach the fortress from behind, while Rick and Deadshot wait at the front gate. Peacemaker tells Rick to lure the elves to a nearby hut when they see the signal, and Deadshot wonders why he won't be fighting. So Peacemaker tells him that he needs to keep an eye on what's happening inside the fortress, telling him he needs to make sure the infiltration team doesn't get caught. We see Clayface in King Shark's bag, and they're about to dive into the water, as he begs King Shark not to let him get wet, because water is bad for him, but King Shark dives into the water anyway. Deadshot waits with Rick, who realizes that they haven't agreed on what the signal is going to be, and they hear King Shark making a strange noise. So Deadshot thinks it's the signal, telling Rick to move, and he kicks him down the cliff. Rick lures the elves to the hut, as Deadshot shoots a statue, and the Thinker realizes that the squad has finally arrived, but he thinks they don't stand a chance, ordering the elves to call Katana. We see Clayface entering the base disguised as the Thinker, and he walks past the elves, but he encounters Katana, who asks him why he summoned her. So he tells her he wants to talk to her about the structure of the brain, and he invites her to join him in the lab. We learn that this is part of the squad's plan, because they need to keep Katana distracted so that they can eliminate the Thinker. Peacemaker tells everyone that he's planning to disguise himself as an elf, so that he can lure an enemy soldier into the hut. But Deadshot thinks his plan will never work, so he removes his clothes and wears a wig, telling everyone his disguise is perfect. But Deadshot thinks he's too buff to deceive the elves, and Rick decides to use King Shark to kidnap one of them. King Shark pulls an elf into the water, and when the elf wakes up, he sees Peacemaker, who recognizes the telepathy device attached to his ear. Peacemaker knows that his brain is connected to the other elves, but he wonders if they will crack under pressure, and he starts torturing him as the elves scream in pain. The Thinker panics, and he orders them to rescue the elf being tortured, so they all rush to the hut, as King Shark and Harley take them on. Deadshot shoots another statue, and Harley recognizes it as the signal, so she runs to the base, as she eliminates the elves blocking her path. The Thinker wonders what the squad is up to, because he wasn't expecting them to attack him without reinforcements, but he suddenly hears an explosion as Harley arrives, telling him his outfit looks terrible. So he uses his telekinesis to prepare for battle, telling her their plan is so stupid that he never thought they would try it, but she thinks he's just upset because he couldn't stop them. He asks her about Katana, so she explains that Clayface is keeping her busy, and she wants to end their fight quickly because she doesn't want her head to explode. She charges in, trying to kill him, but he manages to dodge her attacks, and he kicks her away, as she realizes that he's predicting her moves. She lunges at him, but he uses his telekinesis to stop her, and she ends up getting dizzy as he calls her an idiot. But she suddenly throws her weapon, which knocks him down, as he realizes that he can't read her mind because she hit her head. But he threatens to dive deeper into her mind, and she explains that she isn't afraid, telling him to scramble her brain, so he unleashes his full power. He realizes that she used to work as a psychiatrist at Arkham Asylum, but she fell in love with the Joker, who asked her if she's willing to die for him. He threatens to throw her into a vat of chemicals, telling her to devote her life to him, and the Thinker finds himself in her place, as she tells him he's going to be okay. He wonders how she's doing it, thinking it's impossible, and he freaks out as he falls into the chemicals. But he suddenly wakes up, as Harley asks him if he had a nice dream, and she blows him away. The elves stop moving, as the squad realizes the fight is over, and they see Peacemaker, but Rick is shocked, as he realizes that the elf they captured has been brutally tortured. Peacemaker tells him it was part of the plan, reminding him that they still need to reset their bomb timers, but they suddenly hear an explosion as the entire base starts to crumble. We see the Thinker struggling as Katana appears, telling him he's useless, so she decides to kill him. Harley is able to escape before the base is completely destroyed, but she sees Katana, who is holding Thinker's head. Harley wonders why she killed him, so she explains that he's no longer useful because his cap has been destroyed. She tells her the squad's plan was brilliant as she throws Clayface away and his body starts dissolving in the water. She prepares to fight and Harley charges in, but Katana disarms her, so she asks Clayface to help her. He transforms into a sword, and she uses him to fight Katana. They start exchanging blows, and she manages to destroy Katana's weapon, but she fights on, pushing Harley back. But Clayface uses his powers to strengthen the sword, and this gives Harley the advantage. She manages to land a kick, and she tries to stab Katana's head, but she dodges, and she ends up losing her mask. She finds Harley interesting, and she prepares to continue the fight, but Deadshot arrives, trying to shoot her, so she runs away and dives into the water. She starts escaping with the monster, and King Shark thinks about pursuing them, but Clayface stops him, telling him it would be a waste of energy to chase them now. Deadshot asks Rick if he can do anything about the bombs, but he explains that he can't, and he tells them they need to report the good news. Harley cheers for Arthur as he learns to breathe fire, and he burns the enemy's flag. The kingdom hears about their victory, and the members of the council report to the Queen, saying the squad defeated one of the Empire's generals. Fiona and Cecil are happy to hear this, thinking they were able to change her mind, but she becomes upset, ordering the knights to capture the squad, as Fiona wonders what's gotten into her. The officials argue about whether they should punish or reward the squad, but the Queen breaks them up and tells her servant Theodore that she has something she wants him to do. The squad returns to the castle, thinking they will be rewarded with a feast, but when they get to the throne room, they realize they aren't being celebrated. Theodore calls them out for breaking out of prison and causing chaos, so Deadshot mentions how they defeated the Thinker, but Theodore notes that the Thinker was also from their world, so they were only cleaning up their own mess. He continues to point out their violent and disrespectful behavior, wondering what kind of monster King Shark is. Harley realizes they were never going to be accepted, glaring at Theodore, so he slaps her, and King Shark suddenly eats him. The Queen seems pleased, and Cecil charges in, but King Shark eats his sword. He prepares to call his sword back, but Deadshot stops him, and the others prepare to fight. But King Shark is suddenly caught by the Queen's magic, and she thinks it's a pity that they attacked one of her people, but Harley knows she had Theodore provoke them on purpose. The Queen orders for their execution, but looking at Fiona, she decides to only execute King Shark and exile the others. Deadshot tries to fight, but he has no choice, and King Shark is taken away. As the group prepares to leave, Fiona comes running after them, apologizing for what happened, but Harley is sick of hearing it, mentioning that she didn't even try to object to her mother. Harley leaves her bat, calling her pathetic, and she tells her to go back to her mother. The squad gets drunk at a bar, and Harley reveals she stole a gem before she left. Rick tells her she's had enough to drink, and she thinks they have failed their mission because they were meant to help end the war and build a relationship with the kingdom so that they could get the resources from this world. A minstrel starts singing about them, thinking they are heroes from another world, but Harley gets annoyed and tells him to stop, saying that they are just criminals who were exiled by the kingdom. Clayface gets annoyed he wasn't mentioned in the song, telling the man to keep singing, but Deadshot knocks him out, so Clayface and Deadshot start to fight. The man begs Peacemaker for help, but he gets thrown, and Peacemaker joins in the fight. Rick gets hit with mud, so he also loses it, and they all fight for the rest of the night. The next day, they realize they had too much to drink, and Rick tells them they need to head to the gate so they can reset the timers on their bombs. We see that Harley left Arthur behind, because she knows he will be experimented on if they take him with them. Rick mentions they are going to save King Shark, but Deadshot finds it strange, and Rick mentions leaving him behind would cause problems for this world, but Deadshot is confused, since the bomb in his head should deal with him. They make it back to the gate and reset their timers, but Rick gets a call from Amanda, and the others are shocked he has a radio. Rick reports the situation, saying they won't be able to get help from this world, so Amanda tells him to return. He mentions how King Shark is still in the kingdom, but Amanda tells him she'll deal with it, and Clayface's head suddenly explodes. Rick wonders why she blew him up, so she mentions she has determined that the mission is too difficult, so she will close the gate once he returns. He realizes she plans to kill the squad, wondering if he's next, and Harley tells her to just kill them all. But they suddenly notice the castle is burning, thinking there's a battle in the capital, and Rick begs Amanda to let them continue the mission, saying it's their chance, so Amanda tells him they have 24 hours to produce results, or else they will all die. Clayface wonders what the plan is, and everyone is shocked he's alive, so he explains he can freely move his heart and his brain, so getting blown up won't kill him. They wonder why he went along with everything if the bomb wasn't a threat to him, but he mentions that the story needs a protagonist. 2 hours earlier, we see Fiona thinking she needs to stop the execution, so she goes to find her mother, but sees that she's been replaced. We see Cecil as he reflects on his path as a knight, but there's a disturbance outside, so one of his men goes to check, but he gets stabbed and knocked down the stairs. The minister enters with Thinker's cap, and he notes that he's still getting used to it. Cecil tells him he's committing treason, but he says he's just fulfilling his duty, saying he's following the orders of the Queen, and he sends his men to attack. Meanwhile, Fiona wonders where her mother is, and the queen mentions she disposed of her. Fiona wonders why she would do this, so the queen notes that the more deaths there are, the more her powers return to her, so she was the one who instigated the war between the kingdom and the empire. Fiona tries to attack her, but the queen easily disarms her, noting that the sacred sword that once took her powers is inside King Shark, so there's no one who can stand in her way. She prepares to finish Fiona off, but she's suddenly cut as Cecil comes rushing in. Cecil wonders who the imposter is, so the queen transforms and reveals herself as the undead king. Cecil realizes she was behind the war, and she taunts him with how he lost his wife during the fighting, but he stabs the ground, causing a blinding light, and he manages to get away with Fiona. They barricade themselves in her room, and she cries for her mother, but Cecil tells her she needs to be strong, saying she's the kingdom's only hope. She sees Harley's bat, looking into the mirror, and she thinks she looks pathetic. The minister breaks into the room, telling her to surrender, but she thinks about how she has always held herself back, because it's what she thought her mother and the people needed from her, but she decides it's time to put herself first. The minister tells her she's going to be a sacrifice for the kingdom, but she turns around looking like Harley, and she smashes him with the bat, freeing the soldiers from his control. Cecil runs in to fight, but he's shocked to see that it's already over, and Fiona tells him to rally everyone that hasn't been turned into an undead. Meanwhile, the undead king uses her magic across the city, summoning her skeletons to slaughter everyone. She projects herself to talk to everyone, and she tells the people that they are all about to die, but Fiona interrupts her, telling the people not to be afraid. The undead king attacks the castle with an enormous torrent of water, flooding the castle, and Killer Croc prepares to attack Fiona, but King Shark suddenly protects her. He tells Killer Croc he can't eat Harley, but when Fiona calls out to him, he realizes she's the wrong person. The undead king approaches Fiona, telling her she isn't any stronger just because she changed her makeup. She tells her the castle is about to be destroyed, telling her there's nothing she can do, but she notes that she's not alone, as the undead king is shot, and we see the squad has arrived. They wonder what the plan is, so Rick mentions they should start by saving Fiona. He suggests splitting up into two groups, with one going after Fiona, and the other defeating the undead. Harley volunteers to kill some zombies, and Rick gives her one of his walkie-talkies. So they split up, and we see Harley and Deadshot taking out the zombies. Deadshot shoots at the undead king, but she summons Enchantress to deal with them, reminding her what will happen if she disobeys. Fiona tells Cecil to help them, and he gives her his bracelet before he goes. Meanwhile, the other group is also fighting against the undead, and they see King Shark seems to be losing, so Peacemaker decides to go and help him, but Katana appears, so Clayface and Rick are left to fight her. As King Shark fights, he suddenly gets hit by Killer Croc's monster and is thrown up in the sky. Killer Croc follows up and smashes him, throwing him back down, and it seems like it's over for him, but Peacemaker suddenly appears. Meanwhile, Clayface loses to Katana, but she suddenly runs away, so they go after her, but they find something strange. Harley and Deadshot struggle against Enchantress, and they can't get through her barrier. She drops a building on them, but they realize they're okay, and we see that they were protected. Harley realizes it's Arthur, and Deadshot wonders how he got so big. He starts going after Enchantress, but she can dodge his flames, so Deadshot wonders what they should do. Harley starts fighting with a bone, and she suddenly starts to glow, destroying one of the skeletons. She realizes the gem she stole is magic, so she uses it on her gun. She fires at Enchantress, and it manages to break through her barrier. She tries to fire back, but Arthur counters it with his flames, causing a massive explosion that blows Deadshot away. He gets surrounded by skeletons, but Cecil suddenly appears and shoots them all down. Deadshot thanks him for his help, complimenting his armor, and he mentions it's the armor of a legendary hero. He admits that guns are pretty cool, and they prepare to fight against the next round of undead. Meanwhile, Harley manages to shoot Enchantress down, and she wonders what's her deal, because she seems to have something against the undead king, and she was also the one who saved them when they got shot. Harley sees the look on her face, and realizes it's the same as the people who the Joker took as hostages. Clayface and Rick find Enchantress's real body, but it's inside the skeleton of a dragon, and Katana watches them from above. They decide they should grab her, so Clayface rushes in and transforms, but the dragon easily takes him down and starts biting him, but Rick takes the chance to grab the body, but it smashes into the ground, so Enchantress feels the pain. She flies up to see what's going on, and Harley gets a call from Rick, telling her what they found, so she tells him to bring it to the plaza. Harley tells Enchantress that they have what she wants, telling her they will give it back if she helps them, but she suddenly feels pain, so she thinks Harley is messing with her, so she attacks her, but we see Clayface and Rick dragging her body along, and she's hitting rocks along the way, so she keeps attacking Harley. Clayface and Rick keep running, but they get stuck on a tree, which pisses Enchantress off. The dragon prepares to burn them, but Katana suddenly cuts it in half. They wonder why she saved them, but she just tells them that Harley is waiting for them. Meanwhile, Peacemaker joins the fight against King Croc, but he struggles in the water. King Croc laughs at King Shark for having such a weak friend, and he tells them they have no chance against their teamwork, but he suddenly realizes his monster is missing, and he sees that Peacemaker has taken it onto land. King Croc calls him dirty for targeting the gills, but Peacemaker threatens his monster, telling him not to move, and King Shark notes that even though his friends might not be as strong as him, they're smarter. He starts attacking him, and as King Croc defends himself, Peacemaker threatens his monster, but he notes he doesn't have time for weaklings, which hurts its feelings. Peacemaker lets it go, and King Croc thinks it managed to escape, but it suddenly grabs him and eats him. Meanwhile, Cecil is injured protecting Deadshot, and he offers him his armor, telling him to save the kingdom, and he falls unconscious. Deadshot punches the armor in frustration, but it unleashes a blast of energy that blows a hole in the wall, and he realizes it's enchanted with magic. So he puts it on, and as he fires his gun, it unleashes a massive blast of energy. Meanwhile, Harley fights against Enchantress, but she suddenly becomes dizzy, and we see Clayface rolling with her body. The Undead King notices them, and decides to kill Enchantress before she can get her body back. Enchantress rushes to her body, but she gets shot down, and the Undead King fires another blast at Harley, but Deadshot manages to save her. Enchantress crashes into Clayface, and she manages to get her body back, so Harley wonders if she will help them, but she notes that she just wants to get revenge for being used like a tool. The Undead King uses her magic to enhance her skeletons, making Harley's gun ineffective, but Deadshot comes to their rescue. Peacemaker and King Shark join up with them, and Deadshot gives them all pieces of the armor. They all transform and gain power thanks to the armor, and they charge in against the undead. They're easily able to crush all the skeletons, and they wipe them all out, but they start to get back up, and they realize they need to defeat the boss. Enchantress helps them out, and she tells them to go on ahead, so they fly to face the Undead King, but she launches a barrage of magic at them, and it's too much for them to handle. Arthur gets hit, so Harley and Rick crash down to the castle. They see Fiona, and Harley finds her makeup cute, but the battle continues above them. Rick wonders if Fiona can help with her magic, but she notes that the Undead King can only be defeated by the Holy Sword, and she doesn't know where it is, but Harley comes up with a plan. Meanwhile, Deadshot gets pummeled by the Undead King, and Peacemaker gets sent flying. Clayface attacks with his mud, and King Shark rushes in, but he also gets blown away. Clayface is defeated, and the Undead King calls them all weak, but she gets shot by Rick. Harley flies at her, and she decides to annihilate them, but the squad protects her against the spell. But she ends up getting caught, and the Undead King starts to strangle her, but we see that it's actually Fiona, and she calls for the Holy Sword, which comes out of King Shark, and it cuts off the Undead King's head. As she falls, she realizes she was set up, but Harley rushes over and delivers the finishing blow. After that, the squad is commended for saving the kingdom, but they're more interested in what there is to eat. Rick reports their success in establishing a relationship with the kingdom, but he notes that they saw Katana in the Empire, but we see her standing next to Amanda, so she realizes it's the work of the Joker. We see that he was pretending to be Katana, and he took over the Empire as its new emperor. He notes that the Undead King's plan to create a world full of death was too peaceful for him, because he prefers creating a world where everyone is living on the edge. Amanda thinks he intentionally tried to sabotage their mission, and she orders Rick to hunt him down. The Joker notes that everyone dreams of being in a new world, and he wonders if Harley is having fun, but she just thinks about finding her way back to him. But that's where this video ends. Remember to like and subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching and I'll see you next time.